A change now from emceeing to talking to 4 fantastic women about careers and career panel. This is the one event today where we will have a Q&A. So we'll talk for about 20-25 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes for Q&A. You've seen 2 of these wonderful women already. Marzyeh, who gave a talk earlier on, and then Yinglian, of course, who was just here. But there are 2 new faces. And the first one is Natalie Harris. Hello. She is the co-founder and head of strategic initiatives from BrightHive. Right, so welcome, Natalie, and thank you very much for coming for the career panel.
Thank you, looking forward to this.
And then we have Emily. This is Emily Glassberg, and she is the head of data science and data engineering at Coursera. And I'm sure that amongst the people in the audience, we've had folks who've done courses at Coursera, and we are going to talk a little bit about that as well. So welcome, and let me just start off the career panel with the question that I get asked almost all the time, and that is, what inspired you to choose data science for your career? Okay, so we'll just start here. We'll go, this is the one question, we'll go from Yinglian to Marzyeh.
So yeah, it's an interesting question. I got asked a lot as well. And I would say, I actually, when I started my graduate school, like a PhD study, I was a system student. So I was not data scientist by nature, like at the beginning. And but I really think we are all like sort of getting into an era where data is being collected everywhere. So I started my thesis is network security, and working on network security, started looking at, after we collected so much network data, what we can do. That's kind of first time I'm getting into the security area, system security, collecting data. And I remembered some of my projects and started with the first thing is really data collection and analyzing data, and then to figure out all kinds of patterns. So I think that's the beginning. And after graduation, when I joined Microsoft Research Silicon Valley, and remember that's kind of maybe 2005, 2006, around that time, Google's first paper, like MapReduce, got published. That actually is we all know, like then Hadoop system, etc. And our lab getting into the parallel computing era where you have a lot of data and you have new ways to analyze these data that really open the door to a lot of new possibilities. Right. So I would say start with solving practical system problems, but got into this data science because it becomes our like sort of the way to solving problem.
Yeah, look at you now with your own company. What about you, Natalie?
I'd say data science found me. So I've always been interested and passionate about the impact of technology on society. So for me, when I look at I'm from Bronx, New York, daughter of immigrants. And when I look at the way that government decisions are made and access to resources happen in those decisions, I see the inequality and I see the unfairness and I see the irrationality of it. And so I knew in my career that whatever I was gonna do, it was gonna be examining and fixing government and how to make those decisions better. And so when I went to college eons ago, there was no data science program. So I have a degree in sociology and a degree in computer science because I never really knew what I wanted to do. And as my career evolved, I quickly learned that it wasn't the technology that was the problem. It was the data that was available to make those decisions and humans' capacity to be able to use that data to make decisions. And so if you follow my career through NSA and then going on to the Hill and then the White House and then now starting my own company, core to that has been helping people to do more with data.
That's great. And Emily, you do very similar things, helping people with data.
Yeah.
You've always been interested in education, but I don't know if you ever thought that you would actually do data science.
I did not.
Education.
So similar situation. So I'm actually a labor economist by training, and I care deeply about creating equality of opportunity in the labor markets. And so a lot of my academic research was oriented around how a person's gender or her social network influences the career opportunities that are available to her, or even how productive she is on the job. And I actually found academia to be very rewarding, but not always as directly tied to the impact. And I think it's very challenging to disrupt labor markets directly, but going one level lower and creating equality of access in the education market felt in particular in 2014 as I was finishing up grad school like a real opportunity. And so I joined Coursera not to be a data scientist, I didn't know what a data scientist was, but just to try to make data useful, try to match people better to content, try to help them get through their learning experience, try to create valuable signals in the labor market so they can be rewarded for what they know. And 5 years later, here I am.
So Marzyeh, were you a data scientist by design? So you knew when you went to high school that you were going to do this?
I don't think I was a data scientist by design. I chose computer science as an undergraduate, honestly, because it was the thing I knew the least about. I thought, oh, I'll learn something in college. That'll be great. And my dad was like, chemical engineering. You should be a chemical engineer. I was like, no, I don't want to do that. But I think that for me, what happened was after my undergraduate degree, I went to work for Intel, and I spent a little bit of time in their emerging platforms group and then their digital health group. And it was really focused on trying to make devices and trying to acquire new data so that they could make decisions. The company was trying to make devices that would allow for data so that they could make decisions about what do people need. And that was very inspiring for me. And so I applied for a Marshall Scholarship and got it, went to Oxford, did some research there. And my advisor there was really great. He said, if you stay here, we'll give you a PhD in another year. But really, you should go to MIT and work with this person. And
why not Stanford? Why was MIT?
The secret is I was admitted to both, MIT and Stanford, and I don't know if you like the comedian.
I know, that's why I'm asking.
So there's this comedian on Netflix, Hassan Minhaj, who talks about having immigrant parents. My father's from Iran. And so he says, I tried to get to know my dad like the way that my friends did. And so I said, Baba, what's your favorite color? And he said, Stanford, go study. And I related to this so much. I'm like, yes, that's very much to the eternal disappointment of my family, I chose MIT, not Stanford.
We forgive you, we forgive you. One of the things that I love so much, not just about the four of you, but almost everybody, well, there are a couple of exceptions, but almost everybody who I meet in this field has a story like this. They say, were you a data scientist by design? No, I sort of discovered it as I went along. And in the WiDS stories today, we had a tweet today from a woman called Prati out here that I just wanted to mention. She's the same. She was a hardcore bench scientist, she said, and then she became a data scientist because she realized during her career that she wanted to understand high-dimensional cancer sequencing and develop diagnostic tools. So this is another example of somebody who shifts focus. And that brings me to the next question that we often get is how do you prepare for a career like this? Because now data science is extremely popular. A lot of people are thinking about it. A lot of people listening today are wondering about a data science career and hope for inspiration. And then the question is, how do I prepare? What are the best courses I can take? How can I set myself up for success later? But you're just sort of found it. The happenstance, or serendipity, or whatever you want to call it. So what do you answer people that ask you that question? What is the optimal way for me to prepare? And I'm going to start with you, Emily, because we had a little chat about this earlier, and I liked your view on this.
Yeah, so this idea of optimal path it's challenging, and it's certainly challenging for those of us who didn't know we wanted to go into data science. But even if you know you wanted to go into data science, the field is changing at such a fast clip, and the world is changing at such a fast clip that there's no one bundle of skills, right? Like Coursera may want me to say, oh, go take Andrew Ng's machine learning course, you're golden, but that's actually not how it works. There's no one bundle of skills that's gonna let you be productive throughout life, that's gonna let you solve the set of societal challenges that you wanna solve throughout life. And so, I think optimal path is hard, it's different for different people, but I think it probably has three components. I think one is, if we're going to need to have this agility, this flexibility, then there are certain foundations that we need. There are math foundations, there are critical thinking foundations, there are systems thinking foundations that will serve us kind of in a variety of different worlds. The second, I think, is actually a growth mindset. So, every day we run into problems that we don't know how to tackle. And actually, I think that's one of the really beautiful things about the field. I think that's what makes it fun and stimulating. You have to keep learning. You're encouraged to keep learning. It's part of your career. But being able to run into things that are hard and sort of keep pushing through until you figure out an answer is really important. And then the third is, I think, there's no such thing as a single type of data scientist or a mold for data science. And so it's increasingly important that each of us thinks about, okay, what are my unique strengths and what are my passions? What are the problems in the world that I care about solving? And how can I marry those together today? Not necessarily how can I marry those together in 20 years from now and let me plot the path there, but all of the women that we've heard from today have taken risks throughout their lives. Data scientists love kind of exploration versus exploitation when they're building algorithms. Like, why don't we add more exploration to our own careers and our own lives? And I think that's a really fun and beautiful thing about the field, but I also think it's really important to have the type of impact that we want to have.
Yeah, and talking about impact, I want to go to you, Natalie, because when I look at what you do, you need even more apart from what Emily was mentioning, because you deal a lot with ethics and fairness and equity. And so when people want to approach problems from that angle, what other skill sets would they need? I mean, how could they prepare for that?
So when I have these conversations with folks, I always say that I'm sure everybody has seen the three overlapping circles of what a data scientist is: math and computer science, and then other. And I hate that graphic. Because similar to what Emily's saying, you get the foundational stuff. You learn how to program in R today, and it'll be Q tomorrow. So you get all those skills, but those skills will always be evolving. What I look for when I talk to data scientists is I want to know what your passion is. You never lead with data. You lead with a problem that needs to be solved. What problem do you want to solve? For me, it was around workforce. For me, it was around equality of access to opportunity. So what problem do you want to solve? And then I really need data scientists that know how to ask questions. Like, just look at problems and ask questions and bring your own experiences to the table as you ask those questions. That's what we need for data scientists today and into the future. Those are skills that kind of can be taught in a classroom, but really are just innate in who you are and how you think and how you evolve and appreciating your own unique skills. So I say education and those foundational things are really important, but the love of learning is what I would put in that one box. Passion is what I would put in one of those circles, and then an ability to ask a lot of questions.
It's very similar to what you said. You ended your talk saying, here are some tips for if you want to start your own company. One is the first thing you say, what's your mission? Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you about this too, because going from a research institute where, yes, you're working independently and you have a lot of free will in choosing your problems, even at Microsoft, but it's very different than starting your own company. Were you prepared for that? And what did you do to be successful? I mean, was the learning curve just tremendously high?
So that's an interesting transition that you talk about, like sort of going from like academia to kind of having a startup, like sort of a company, and being able to carry out what I'm passionate about, of solving these security problems and fraud detection problems all alone. And so I find slightly different angles, like you mentioned, when you're in academia, in research environment. And what you focus on is more like sort of, there are you're looking for practical problems to solve, and you get a little bit more unbounded. At the same time, you think about sort of the mission at that time, sort of research is advanced state of art of innovation. What are the new ideas, new algorithms there that could not just solve this one particular problem, but you wanted a methodology that could be generalized, solve many, many problems. So that's kind of more the research angle when you're talking about innovation, is you focus on the algorithm side.
Where did you get your business sense?
the business part is very different. That's why kind of when we switch to the business, I want to like sort of also comment on it becomes a more mission oriented and a lot more like focus on we have kind of this kind of a mission that a bigger problem. And from the research experience, we find, oh, everybody's facing this particular problem that is not getting solved. And it doesn't, it requires not just a lot of like sort of methodologies and data science, like sort of these algorithms, but it also requires something end-to-end to make it happen in reality, and that's a lot more focused mission. So I would say the transition from like a research world into a startup world is you become a lot more focused to say you have a clear mission, you have a problem you want to solve, and solving this particular like fraud domain, like a user lifetime cycle, there are fraud, abuse, and all kinds of problems, then you become extremely focused on that, and all the kind of data science, like sort of the methodology and the kind of talent is geared toward that specific.
Well, I'm in awe because I know it's a huge change, and now you have to worry about the bottom line and not just about the number of citations you get. It is a very different thing.
In fact, yes, yeah. And so, in fact, for example, like sort of I decided like sort of I don't have time to serve on the program committees, although I love research, but really have to focus on like solving basically how to bring these methodology into production of high QPC environment and to these largest customers of hundreds of millions of users, billions of users, and not to worry about like production, like we have downtime, and we are going to detect the new type of attacks like day to day. So that becomes kind of a center of the problem.
I really don't know how you do it. I stayed in academia because all I want to worry about is whether my graduate students show up in time and not, and not about what thousands of customers have to complain about. But so one of the questions I get a lot is why did you stay in academia? Because there's an incredible amount of money, of course, to be made out there, right? I could go work for a company and earn a lot more than Stanford gives me. So I'm looking at you, Marzyeh, because you're still in the university. So
I am, yes.
Why?
So I mean, you're an academic, so I hope I can say this without insulting you too much, right? Like, I think all academics, we're a little bit narcissistic, right? Like, because you have to submit grants and they're rejected. You submit papers, they're rejected. And the rejections are sometimes one sentence. This is no good, period, right? Like, and so like you have to be able to deal. My advisor told me when I started at MIT, this is a praise-free zone. And he accidentally copied me on an email where he had said in the email to somebody else that I seemed competent, and I started, and I put it in the folder in my email saying, like my feel-good folder, and I look at it sometimes, oh, he thinks I'm competent. So I think that there is...
Oh, you seemed competent.
I seemed competent. It's unclear. We have to investigate more. So I think that the big thing about being an academic is I have worked at several companies. So I did an internship at Microsoft Research. I was a visiting researcher at Verily. I collaborated with people at Google. I worked at Intel. I don't want to work on somebody else's good ideas. I want to work on my good ideas. And I think that there's a huge motivation for me, even though it's sometimes a lot harder because it's all on you, right? I really want to work on my ideas, and I'm really driven by the problems that fascinate me.
Was that the same for you, Natalie, when you started doing your own consulting as well? To say, look, I want to work on problems that I'm just really personally very passionate about?
Yeah, sometimes I don't know why I did it. And my husband doesn't either. It was after I left my time in the administration, I went back to NSA, and I felt like I wasn't done. I felt like there was still something I needed to do, and I couldn't do it where I was sitting. So I found a friend who was passionate about the same, helping government do better with data, and we started a company. And we've gone through all the stresses, and I really appreciated your slide, because I went through and I was like, yep. How do you make payroll? And it's just, it's hard and it's stressful, but it's a different kind of stress as a startup. I like working on my own ideas, but I also like, as a startup, I get to control. I have a lot more control over the conversations I have around the impact I want to have. And I think that was the biggest motivator for me with going to a startup is I knew that I wanted to work on data sharing, and I knew I wanted to do it at the state and local level, and I knew I wanted to do it specifically for workforce. And there was no other place, because I interviewed, there was no other place that was going to let me work on that thing. So I said I was going to work on it anyway.
All of the things that all of you have done are not necessarily, risk averse. Huh? You run a lot of risks. You can fail. You can be judged and criticized all the time. We know this in academia for sure, but it's the same with startups. You may not get your customers. It's the same with Coursera. The job may not be received well. It's the same for you, Natalie. You may not get any consulting jobs. So that brings me to the point that you made, Emily, about growth mindset. This is such an important point, and every single time I teach both men and women, I see still the difference, that women tend to be much more nervous about potentially failing and have a really hard time just accepting that from time to time they're going to be disappointed, but it doesn't mean they can do it. They still have much of a stronger imposter syndrome, as we say, than the men. So, Emily, talk a little bit more about it. You brought this up. Have this growth mindset. How can somebody create and cultivate that growth mindset?
Yeah. Great question. I think, different approaches work for different people. There's probably no single silver bullet. But if there is one, it's awareness. So actually, we see this in the Coursera data. So if you look at the rate at which men and women persist through STEM content, you see that when they're both getting A's on their first assignments, they persist at equal rates. When they're getting B's, it diverges a little. Women drop off a little more quickly. When they're getting C's, women drop off much more quickly. One of my graduate school advisors, Claudia Golden, found the same phenomenon in undergraduate major choices. So women are more responsive to early grades and intro content than are their male counterparts. And I think part of our jobs as women in data science is to design solutions that work for our diverse user bases. So one of the things we built on Coursera is a feature called in-course help. It intervenes as you're moving through courses. If you look like you're at risk of dropping out, it'll serve you a personalized intervention. And it can be behavioral. So things like emphasizing social proof. People like you have been successful in this context. Or growth mindset. Or even pedagogical intervention. So here is review material that will help you when you reattempt the assignment. So review material, by the way, doesn't help at all for male learners on average. It helps a lot for female learners. Does anyone want to guess why?
Do the men look at the review content?
No, the men don't look at the review content at all.
I give these review sessions, and no male students come to the review sessions, and I'm like, guys, the exam is going to be this.
So the review intervention disproportionately works for women, exactly, because they're about 20% more likely to actually engage with it.
Bears this out, because I had told my male colleagues, guys, there are no men at the reviews. They're like, no. I'm like, I am there. They're okay. I feel vindicated. Okay.
But zooming out to our own lives, right? I think this awareness of, hey, there are other people like me that have run into similar barriers and been successful. There are resources available to me to help me get through is a lot of kind of building that muscle. And I was having an interesting conversation at lunch today. First year of graduate school was horrific for me. I was the only person admitted to the PhD program who hadn't taken, so I was at Harvard studying economics and I hadn't taken real analysis. And everyone else in my first year courses had already taken the first year courses as undergrads, and so I was getting destroyed. And I think when you step back and realize, I haven't had the same exposure up to now, but I can break through a wall, then that reminds you that you can break through future walls.
That's right. Yeah, that's what I said also. You're just a little behind. Yeah. I mean, you cannot catch up. We're pretty good at that, typically. So we're going to open it up really soon to questions from the audience. So think about those questions and get ready. In the meantime, while you're doing this, I want to ask each and one of you to tell me one thing you wish you had known before you started your current job.
You changed them.
Okay. What was the one pearl of wisdom you wish you had heard before you started? Okay. So Marzyeh, I'm sure you know the answer to this already, so I'll start with you.
Is it for my professor job?
Yes, your current job.
Because I just started it, so like eight months ago, and so
So you know exactly now what you wish you'd known 8 months ago.
I think what I wish I would have known is that, and of course it makes sense now, but in a PhD you spend so long focusing on something, right? What I wish I would have known is that, at some point people recognize that you can do a focused problem really well, and then they want you to do a breadth of things, and that's what being a professor is all about, right? You've already demonstrated technical depth, do all these other things.
Right. And what about you, Yinglian?
Actually, I would say I have many things I wish I know. Like
You can only pick one.
Starting this company, and throughout the journey, and I really felt like sort of I would say like from this academia world coming back immediately into kind of you kind of come into one extreme, very very kind of research side of world, and suddenly into this business side of world, and I think I wish I could have known like a little bit more basically on toward the other end, basically what I would say like sort of the more like sales side, the marketing side, that part I would wish actually I could have like learned a little bit more, and I'm doing the hard way also like with my co-founder, the two of us. Particularly we come from the same background. Both of us PhDs. She's from Berkeley, I was from Carnegie Mellon. We worked at Microsoft. We come from the same world. So if we could have also somebody a little bit more complement to us to work together.
And now you can hire them, right?
Well, we have a team very strong, but I think retrospect, like back, I think having somebody complement us early days, the other side would have.
Yeah, that makes total sense. What about you, Natalie?
So early in my career, I had been of this mindset to pursue career. So pursue jobs and pursue promotions, and that was my value. That was how I determined my success. It wasn't until I got to my 30s that it shifted for me, and I realized that I needed to start pursuing I needed to get a better understanding of what value I brought, and then how I could pursue my passions based upon that. I wish I had known that sooner, because I feel like I'm behind the curve now, starting a startup. I'm not, I know, but I feel imposter syndrome. But I feel like I'm a little behind the curve now because I wasted my 20s pursuing promotions instead of pursuing the skills necessary to pursue my passion.
Yeah, the question, of course, then is, could you have done that any faster if somebody had told you? Is that not something that you just have to discover for yourself?
I probably could have if I'd sat through a review session.
They work proportionately well for women. Yeah.
Emily, very quickly, your thoughts on this, and then we go to the audience.
Yeah, so the thing I wish I'd known when I started my job at Coursera 5 years ago is that it's a lot more important what challenges we're tackling than how perfectly we tackle them.
Yep.
And I think that was a challenge transitioning from academia in particular, but this desire to understand the exact causal impact or get the algorithm tuned just right, oftentimes wasn't worth it in the scheme of things. And so stepping back, thinking about the big picture, what do I care about accomplishing? What's the 80-20 rule? It's I think, been more rewarding for me since, and it's something I wish I knew earlier.
Wonderful. There's a lot of really fantastic tweetable quotes here in this panel, so please go ahead and tweet them out to the world. Okay, we'll open it up to Q&A. So the mic's ready? Okay, great. Get somebody going. So remember, just one question and no follow-up question, right?
Hi, I'm Srita. Thanks. It was a pretty interesting panel session. My question is, you're all, in positions of leadership, and as a person who's interested in leadership, I am often conflicted between these two things, like about putting my heads down, getting technically more strong, and pursuing more technically challenging roles and opportunities versus like putting my heads up and looking for leadership opportunities and empowering people. So I kind of I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you worked on this like balance and trade-off as you're progressing through your careers.
Wonderful question. Natalie, why don't we start with you?
I never picked. I was told I needed to pick. I was told I needed to be a manager or be technical, and I did both. And yeah, I never picked. What I did instead was I looked for jobs that did things that I wanted to do. And if I needed to be in a leadership position to do that job, then I took the leadership position to do that job. But I never pursued leadership just to be a leader. It was for a purpose. It's interesting, and I'll try to make it really quick. The CTO of our company, he's an astrophysicist, and so he really hates leadership. He really just wants to code. He's a data scientist at heart, but he recognized that he needs to be a leader, and he needs to run the technology platform and run the developers. And so he has a very different leadership style than others of us, because you can't tell him not to code.
Marzyeh, you, as a professor, you are also a leader in your own way.
I think that there's technical leadership, and I think there's a lot of power in being the person that people ask to be on grant review committees or an expert in a field. I think that there's a lot of technical leadership that you can provide and that you should invest in for yourself. I think I tend to really agree with Natalie. I don't take leadership positions that are just leadership positions. They have to make sense with what I care about. You know, I'm a professor. I care about machine learning and health. You know, I work on developing methods and models that work in that space. So if the leadership position is not relevant to that, I tend to say no. But I think that there's different strategies.
Yeah.
Let's take the next question. And then maybe we can get the other mic going for the next one so that we can start that immediately. Yeah.
I think this is going to be a little bit salt on the wound, but I want to ask about the failure. So what are the biggest failure that you had in your career, and what is the take home?
The biggest failure? Saying, first I thought you were asking about pay. Saying, well, we're not going there. The biggest failure. Emily, you talked about growth mindset, so let me...
I've had so many, so many. You know, I mean, I think in my academic career, it's the failure that I already spoke to, which is first year was just tremendously theoretical and technically challenging. I think in industry, you know, the biggest failure probably is struggles sufficiently influencing the broader organization to pursue the recommendations coming out of the data science team and to implement some of the models we've built in production. And that's, you know, it's very context dependent. It's dependent on, you know, who are your cross-functional partners, how are your relationships with those partners, and the learning coming out of that is, you know, whether you are a leader or not, your job is to build the relationships required to get the things you care about accomplished. And so the importance of people, people who believe in you, people who understand what you're doing, not just your manager, but also your cross-functional peers, you know, really became particularly obvious to me a couple years ago, and since has been an area where I've invested in more heavily. I think it's easy to think that, you know, if I have a strong team or I'm doing good work, that's sufficient, but the truth is, it takes a village, it takes a company, and a lot of that is relational. And so making sure you're investing sufficiently in relationships has been, I think, my biggest failure and my biggest learning.
So any of you want to do a failure, like a really embarrassing thing that you want to share?
I fell out of a chair last week.
Oh gosh, all of my failures involve cursing. Yeah, I don't have a really...
Oh, let's go to the next question.
Yeah.
Next question.
So my question, hi, I'm Emma. My question is about, as we all go back to our individual companies and roles, what do you guys see as the biggest things that we can do so that future WiDS women have doors open to them and opportunities?
Well, anybody can start this one.
Well, the first thing you can do is bring her next year. WiDS is more than this conference. WiDS is groups and engagements and all kinds of things connected to this community. The biggest thing you could probably do, going back to your company, is find ways for your company to engage so that because the biggest thing we can do as women, right, is see other women doing these great things. You don't have to lead the project yourself, but everything that happens requires at least 3 people. So how do we engage and bring more people into the conversation and have more accomplishments? At BrightHive, we give everybody 20% of their time to pursue whatever they want. And you can identify opportunities, whether it be through WiDS or some other communities of practice and affinity groups, to encourage them to use that 10%, 15%, 20% to pursue things that have nothing to do with the company or something to do with the company, but much more focused on connecting them with the broader community.
What about you, Yinglian? What would you say to this?
Well, I definitely echo some of being talked about of like sort of supporting each other and bringing to like community awareness. And I think one thing like we've been doing, for example, DataVisor is always like the 2 founders, females as well, like sort of working on data science and starting a company. And frankly, when we just started this company, we too think about whether we need a male co-founder. We look around, we try to find, it's difficult, and the 2 of us just look at each other. We stop doing it. Probably not. That's our dream. We really wanted to do it. And even if we are 2 women, we support each other. And let's continue to do this. And we've also been trying to some of our like sort of many of, I would say, like sort of our data scientists, like team members, are like also like women and participating in kind of in this career. And we also would sponsor, for example, like came from like sort of Carnegie Mellon sponsoring girls to attending, for example, Grace Hopper's conference, etc. So I think the community supporting ourselves and bring awareness and all working on this topic definitely promotes this interest and curiosity and promotes this position. Yeah.
I find that such an important comment. I just wanted to point out one thing. At Stanford, people have been doing some research on communications around campus and what sort of tone these communications have, and they find out that mostly in an academic environment, but probably also in companies, it's critical, judgmental. So one of the best things we can do, I think, is just be really positive towards one another. What I would add. We're going to go to what probably will be the last question. You were so patiently waiting.
Thank you for your talks and your advice. I was just wondering, I'm trying to get my foot in the door in data science, and I constantly read on Twitter some horror stories from women feeling undervalued or undermined in their environment because they're probably like the only woman in the team. So I'm just wondering, how have you handled hostile working environments if you've had any?
That is a beautiful question to finish on. Very uplifting question to finish this career panel. We have 1.5 minutes, and you know what I'm like, so I'm going to put you all off the podium. So very quick answers from all of you.
There was a male student who complained to my advisor and said I was hard to work with. And so my advisor said, you know, she's exactly the way she has to be to deal with people like you. And I would strongly encourage you to seek out mentors. Like, it's not a project that's going to make you successful, it's people.
Yeah.
Have people invest in you.
Actually, I think that is just such a beautiful note to end on, and we're out of time. I want to thank you all. This was amazing. Wonderful.